One, two. We're live, Miss Angela. Good morning, folks. I guess it is still morning, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's still morning. Alrighty then. Alrighty then. We're back. We're back, folks. Live at Mike's Magic Auto Detailing and Paint Enhancement here in sunny Sharpsburg, Georgia, and it actually is sunny today. Oh boy. And what we're doing, yeah, see there, look, there it is. Oh, there you go, right there. We won't do the magnet test on the car. I don't think we need to do that again today. It's not going to stick to it will stick to this paint. Maybe not where we buffed yesterday, but anyway, I think people get bored seeing that magnet test unless there's a point to be proven. And they see those commercials a lot of times on YouTube, on Facebook, and TV, where they're hawking these products. Oh man, this stuff works so good. You can set a bottle on it, it'll just slide off. Well, that one's not going to slide, but because we don't have any protection on there at all. But just, folks, just about anything you use, that test will work. Especially if you've got a slanted surface, it'll work. It doesn't prove a hell of a lot, trust me. So don't be impressed by those commercials. But late yesterday, I was showing Miss Angela how to use a dual action buffer, and we actually did a very small test portion on the hood up here, which you want to do a test spot first to see if the product and the equipment you decided to use, if that's actually going to get the results you have envisioned in your mind, because it doesn't always. We got somebody watching, Miss Angela. It ain't telling me who it is, but it says one watcher. So anyway, I will review what I showed Miss Angela yesterday and see how much of that she actually retained. But what we did, yeah, that's the product we used. Sometimes you can get this on the retail level, and this is a pretty unaggressive product. It's just for refining and enhancing gloss, which is okay. It's okay for this car and this paint, which is not, this has not been touched. It's just been strip washed and clay barred. So you could see this paint is not that bad. And it does have micro marring in different places from car washes. Mm-hmm. And probably she washes her own car a lot of times, probably from her washing method. I think she uses the traditional method that a lot of people do, which will cause micro marring if you don't do it properly. But it's kind of like the car wash, the commercial car wash. Sometimes that's better than doing nothing, but it is going to leave micro marring, which over time will oxidize the paint and that kind of stuff and make it look a little bit dull. And it over time it'll just get a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a little bit worse, and then the first thing you know, your clear coat has deteriorated to the point where it starts to fail. So anyway, so when we're getting ready to start buffing, Miss Angela, we've decided on our product. Mm-hmm. We've got our dual action long throw polisher here. We've put a orange Lake Country pad on it, which we reviewed all that, the different pads. It's kind of a medium to light aggressiveness, and as opposed to the black or white pads, which are finishing pads, which I think we're going to be fine most of this car with just that pad right there. As you can see, I mean, we examined this with our inspection light yesterday. This is the section we did with our inspection light, and I'd say 99% of what defects were here and scratches were here are now gone, which means they are gone forever. They will not come back. It might get re-scratched for some reason, but those scratches that were on that section of the hood will not come back. They are gone and gone permanently. So now we're going to move on to this bottom part, and we talked about, you know, do we need to tape these character lines off, tape these edges off, all this, and we'll probably do some taping on parts of the other car, and when we get to that I'll show you that and why. And the reason we're not taping this off, these character lines and ridges, is, and the reason most people do, is because the paint here and on the edges is usually very thin, or much thinner than it is here, and you run the risk of burning the paint on these high ridges and along the edges here. But since we're using a dual action polisher, the risk for that, in my estimation, is extremely minimal, if at all. Now, if we were using a rotary buffer, yeah, we'd be taping off everything, because it's very easy to burn paint with a rotary buffer. I don't care who you are, how much experience you have. But the key to using these buffers, any of them, is to keep moving. Don't sit in one spot with your buffer. Don't do it. Because even with your dual action, if you sit there and mash down and let it sit, which people have a tendency to do when they come up on a scratch and they want to get rid of it, you're generating a lot of heat when that pad is spinning, particularly these foam pads and the other hybrid wool pads, whatever it is you're using, and that's when you get into trouble. But we'll go over that later if we run into a problem spot, how we solve that problem at another time. And the first thing we did, since we buffed late yesterday and the thing has sat here overnight, even though we're in a garage, I've got the air conditioner running, it's relatively dust-free environment, but just out of an abundance of caution, in the event some dust had settled on the paint overnight, what's the first thing we did, Miss Angela? Paint prep. And we used, you can use a number of different things to do that. What we used is just some Optimum paint prep, and the reason I use this is because it does have a little bit of lubrosity, which means lubrication, so that I didn't scratch the paint when I was wiping off whatever dust might have been there. And it's always just a good idea to do this before you buff a panel. I know guys that'll they'll paint prep the whole car and then get to buffing. I like to do my paint prep one panel at a time, because while we're working on this panel buffing, sometimes, I'd say almost always, sometimes it's minimal, you're also going to create dust from your product. They all dust a little bit, sometimes it's barely noticeable. And then what happens, it's landing over there, so that if we go to that part of the hood next, if you paint prep the whole car, you're not getting the dust you just generated. So I like to do it one panel right at a time, right before I do it. And this stuff right here is what they call Body Shop Safe. I think this is what a soy-based paint prep as opposed to a petroleum one. But you know, once you paint prep it, and we just sprayed a little bit on the paint and then used a medium pile, good quality microfiber towel, wipe whatever dust might have been on there off, and then you have to wait and make sure that it's dry before you start using your buffing pad on it. But with that being said, what's when you're preparing to start, Miss Angela, what's the first thing that I had you do with your buffer?
Clean the pad.
Clean the pad?
Since we used it last
Since we
night.
used it last night, but we didn't use it much, so we didn't have to wash the pad.
Right.
We just do a light cleaning. And how did we do that? Or how did you do that?
Okay.
Yeah.
You turn it on. Take
Yeah,
your brush.
Take a little detailing brush or a toothbrush, something like that.
Run it
Yeah, you let it spin
Glide.
around. The speed really doesn't matter. And what you're doing is just cleaning any surface stuff off of that pad. That's probably pretty good. And ideally, what she would do would be to go over to the air hose and blow it off with compressed air. We're not going to do that because that compressor's too loud. But it's always a good idea to do that. It's not totally necessary, but it's a good idea to use your compressed air to blow it out. So now we're all set. Now later on, when that pad gets gumped up with product that's starting to work its way down into the pores of the pad itself, we'll either have to, one of two things, Angela, what are they? You remember?
Wash it
Either wash it
or change it.
or change it. That's right. So, but you'll be able to tell because when you do the cleaning with the brush, you'll be able to see that there's stuff down in the pad, and you got, like I say, you got two choices: either wash it right then and dry it and put it back on the buffer, or just grab another pad. My tendency most of the time is just to grab other pads because I don't want to take the time during a detail to wash pads, but sometimes I have to. But when that thing starts to get gumped up, that's a foam pad, whether it's a foam pad or a wool pad, the effectiveness of it drops off exponentially. The dirtier it gets, the less effective it is. And i.e., the more time it's going to take you to reach your goal. And sometimes it's just not going to work at all. And you'll be buffing and buffing and buffing and getting nowhere, spinning your wheels as well as spinning your buffer. Oh, we had a couple of yours. One dropped off. I don't blame them. Even though you're a pretty girl to look at, but still, you know. So now, what's the very first? You got your product there.
Sure.
What's the first thing to do? Shake it up. All right. Excellent habit to get into. Maybe not always necessary, but every time I try to get in a habit, no matter what I'm using, whether it's a compound or a polish or even this stuff, I give the bottle a shake. This is just alcohol and distilled water. I'll give that a shake. This is our ONR quick detail. I'll give it a shake just to make sure that everything's good to go. Because stuff does settle, you know, and separate. Especially, all this stuff is mixed with water. Water is the main ingredient almost in all this stuff. And some of them are petroleum based, even soy based. It wants to separate from the water over time. So just out of an abundance of caution, I always try to get in the habit of, when I pick something up, I try to shake it. Not saying I manage to achieve that goal 100% of the time, but usually I do. So anyway, I showed you a couple different ways of putting the product on the paint so that we can get to buffing.
Right.
One of them is, some people do it one way, some people do it another. Some people like to apply it, you know, in dots to the paint, or maybe they put a bead, as they call it. Some people will put their dots on the pad, and then either way you tap it out over the area you're going to be working on, and then turn the buffer on a low speed and spread it, and then you crank the speed up to your operating speed, and then you actually start buffing. So it's basically your choice, your preference, and sometimes it's dictated by whether it's a horizontal surface or a vertical surface. But sometimes if you try to put dots on the vertical surface or a bead, it wants to start running down and dripping all over everything. But it's just a matter of, to me, it's just, I don't think that one way is better than the other way, but it's just, to me, it's just more of a matter of choice. I like, when I can, to put my dots on here, because I think I get more uniform coverage with product that way. If I put the dots on the buffing pad and I start tapping it out, up here I've got a lot, but when I get to tapping down here, I've got less, even though I spread it. I don't know, that may or may not be a wise choice on my part. It's just what I like to do.
Right.
Which way are you going to do it, Miss
Do
Angela?
the dots.
You're going to
and
dot the paint and then tap it out with the
tap
buffer?
it out and then turn it on low.
Okay.
And then spread it.
All right, well, let's do that.
I'm gonna try that.
All right, baby. Did you pull the plug out?
Yeah.
The top up, I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. And it doesn't take as much as most people think. You probably need 4 or 5 small dots on that section. You're not going to need much at all. See, what you've put down volume-wise is probably more than sufficient. Most people overuse the product.
Yeah.
It really doesn't take much. It really doesn't. So you're going to tap it out first, or you're going to
Yes.
spread? Okay, so that's what we call tapping the product out. It just helps to spread it a little bit. And see, when you see, like when you tap on what I call a supply dot, then what you want to do is tap again, like where there is no product. Otherwise, you're just putting product
Just
where
putting
you
it
already
back.
have it. You're kind of wasting time and effort that way.
All right.
Yeah, yeah. Perfect. And now she's going to spread it out. You move fast. You're not buffing at this point. You're just spreading. And a lot of times when you're spreading, you know, when we're buffing, the goal is to keep the pad as flat as possible. That's not necessarily the case when you're spreading it. And sometimes when you're spreading it, you actually want to give it just a slight tilt because that helps to pull the product towards the middle of the pad instead of slinging it everywhere.
Right.
So there again, just kind of a personal preference thing, but you know, and you can move fast when you're spreading
Right.
as opposed to when you're actually doing the buffing. So you're still spreading and you cranked your speed up.
Cranked it
Well, you got it cranked up to on there.
up. Between 2 and 3.
Between 2 and 3, which is probably good for this paint and this car. And you notice she put the cord over her shoulder. That's to keep the cord from brushing up against the car and maybe scratching it. But it also helps to keep the cord out of your damn way, you know. Some people will argue about which shoulder. Should you put it on the opposite of your, I don't know, who knows. There again, I think that's just a matter of preference. Okay, she's going to get started. And we're going to, what kind of arm speed are you going to use, Angela? What we call arm speed. How fast are you going to move across the paint
Slowly,
with the
but-
buffer? How many inches per second?
1.
1, 2, somewhere in that neighborhood. And we're on this paint in this situation, we're going to make 2, maybe 3 passes, just instinct. And, you know, you can go, you know, one way like this, and then maybe your second pass the opposite, just so you're making sure you're getting uniform coverage out of your buffing. Okay, go ahead. It's a little bit noisy, but that's all right. And folks, that is about as fast across the paint as you're going to want to move. Give that product time to work. See, she's trying to manipulate the buffer so that it keeps spinning. Because this is a free spinning buffer as opposed to a gear driven. So that means if you get a little bit off, it will stop rotating. And that's so you don't damage the paint. It's a safety thing. But see, when it stops rotating, it's not doing any good. So you have to kind of manipulate the buffer a little bit, side to side, front to back, to get it to continue to spin. And this is a very curvy car, so it's kind of difficult to use this buffer if you don't have a lot of experience with this particular buffer. You know, every buffer is just a little different, so, you know. But she's done a pretty good job of keeping it spinning and what we call slow arm speed, giving a chance for the product to work. Let's see, stopping. There we go. and she's putting as little downward pressure as possible. You want the weight of the buffer is sufficient pressure on the paint. You don't want to push down on these buffers. And but sometimes, like when you get vertical surfaces and all, you have to put pressure to keep the buffer up against the paint. But so essentially you want as little pressure on the buffer against the paint as you can get away with. And then, yeah, we set the buffer down. How do we set it down? With the pad up, so we don't get any extra dirt on the pad. We'll grab our buffing towel. We'll remove the product that she just did and check our work, as we say. And I think that's looking pretty slick. Yeah, you don't have to worry about every little bit because we're going to paint prep, because we're going to ceramic coat this thing anyway. So, see, with these bright LED lights I've got overhead, you can kind of see pretty good. And I see very little defects left in this paint. I'll try to get closer so you guys can see that. There are virtually no scratches left. And you did down to here?
Yes.
So that means we got to do this little narrow spot, which we'll come back and do those last, because that buffer with the 5-inch backing plate on it is probably not going to work on like these little bitty areas right here. So what do we do about that, Miss Angela?
We use the smaller.
We'll get a smaller buffer out, which has a 3-inch backing plate on it. It's a shorter throw. What she was using was the long throw polisher, which are relatively new out. This one is an old school. I've had that thing forever. We'll be still using an orange pad. It's just Velcro. You just slap it on there. And this is probably 5 to 8 millimeter throw. I don't know exactly. So it works a little slower, a little less effective than the long throw with the 15 millimeters. They even make 21 millimeter throws now. I was like, I can't keep up with you people. Y'all come out with new stuff faster than I can buy it. That's okay. But we'll be using that on these little spots. And we may end up having to get out an even smaller buffer for some of these places, which I'll show you that if we need it. Some of the people that watch all my videos know what I'm talking about. You know, they call it the nano polishing kit. But anyway, we'll worry about that bridge when we cross it. So what we're going to do now is we'll move on. And we're not going to bore y'all with us buffing every inch of this car. We may come back later on and show you us using the 3-inch, the small one, maybe even the nano polisher if it becomes necessary. But we're going to finish the hood, which normally I wouldn't start on the hood, but that's where I like to start with my test. Because hoods get hammered a lot. Sometimes I'll start on the roof, but the roof on this car is totally different. As you can see, it's black paint up there, and we've got silver paint here, or gray, whatever you want to call it. The roof is hammered really bad, but I'm suspecting because this paint up here, very fragile, very thin, very cheap. I'm not sure what it is, but it's hammered really bad. So we may have to do something a little different up there. But we'll have to experiment with that when we get done with the hood to figure out what's going to work best up there. I've got an idea what's going to work, but sometimes you just don't know till you give it a shot, and we'll do a test spot up there. Even the highest level pros that I'm aware of, I watch their videos. Even they do test spots a lot of times on every panel. So, I mean, if they have to do them, I don't feel too bad about having to do them. Some guys say, oh, I can just look at it and tell. Maybe they can. I don't know. I really don't know, but it depends, I think, a lot of times on what level you're taking the car to, what level of detailing. You know, if you just want to get it clean and shiny, that's relatively simple on most cars. And the process is really not all that intricate. And, you know, most of the motoring public, it's like I was telling you yesterday, most people would look at this car and say, hey, that's good. Give me my keys, I'm ready to go. How much do I owe you? They think this is perfect. Okay, that's good. I mean, you know, look at it. It's clean. It's clean. Very clean. Pretty shiny. Pretty shiny. It's going to get shinier when we're done. We'll put the glass back to almost factory condition, that sort of thing, and we'll protect the tires and all that. But most people don't care about all that. They just don't. And, you know, because, you know, their car is a way to get from here to there.
Right.
And that's fine if that's what they like. But anyway, we're going to get back to work on the hood, folks. We do appreciate y'all dropping by and visiting with us, and hopefully maybe some of you might have learned something, or at least have some food for thought, because sometimes you just don't know what you don't know, which is the case a lot of times with this stuff. People don't understand because they don't really know what's going on. But if you enjoyed this video, or even if you didn't, but you're kind of interested in keeping up with this series, we'll be doing a whole series with Miss Angela here, learning how to do this and doing her car. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and you'll be notified when new videos come out of Miss Angela learning this stuff and doing this stuff. And you know, you'll also be notified of future projects that I work on, or we work on. One of the reasons she was wanting to learn this stuff, A, she was interested, and B, there will be times when maybe she can help me with future projects so that I move along a little faster. I mean, it made a big difference yesterday when there was two of us clay bar in this car as opposed to just me by myself. We moved along faster. You know what? But you guys give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs down. I don't really care. It helps me out, they say. You know, if you make a comment down there, that helps me out a lot too, they say. And, you know, that's a good place to put questions. If you're curious about something or you have a question, you know, either send me a PM or put it in the comment section down there, and I'll answer any and all questions as soon as I possibly can to the fullest of my knowledge and ability. And you know what, if you're watching, I'm always interested in where you are watching from. I always find that kind of a curiosity thing. So if you'll put that in the comments section, that will be absolutely fantastic. But we're going to get back to work. It's kind of pleasant in here with the air conditioner running. We were sweating yesterday. I mean, sweating bad at some point. But anyway, folks, I appreciate every one of you. I thank you. And we'll catch y'all later. Bye-bye.